first, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
So, well, I'm Sebastiaan, and I'm sort of an open source programmer full-time now. Sort of made that work. I basically switched out of doing freelance consulting kind of gigs for startups in Singapore for a number of years. And about 2 years ago, I was just really taking a side interest into HTTP2, and one thing led to another, and I ended up getting involved with Node Core a little bit, working on that, to some extent. And now for the past 6 months or ish, I've been building a bunch of tooling around that and a sort of a CDN, a content delivery network, where people host static sites, and that gets deployed on open hardware worldwide. And that's kind of where my current efforts are mostly focused, sort of working on extensions to that, where it becomes like a DNS serving service as well. Yeah, mostly that.
That's really fun. Yeah, I know a lot of people have been trying to find ways to do open source as a career. It can be tough.
Definitely true. I think financially, the biggest change for me has been scaling back to just what you need so that I can focus on this. And it was a very, very conscious decision that's been, fortunately very supportive by my wife, who's been okay with us not traveling all the time, and this kind of just scaling back your expenses to a level that you're comfortable with, just to let you focus. And I still do like the odd freelance gig here and there, but I try to keep that to the absolute minimum that I can basically purchase my own time. So it's an opportunity cost rather than having to go and do fundraising or do a bunch of time on client projects. So it's yeah, but I think it can be done. And it's not the first time I do this. I've done this a few times before, and it's good to be able to have that flexibility to refactor your life to pursue what it is that you find most interesting at that moment in time.
Great. And so you've also given a talk here at NodeConf EU that, from what I hear, has gotten quite a bit of a buzz. Can you tell us a little bit about this talk?
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I'm really, happy with all the feedback that I'm getting so far. And it was kind of cool. After the talk, I got mobbed for people trying to get the t-shirts, and I had a couple of the little servers that the CDN runs on. That was, I was kind of like showing them, and a couple of people offered to purchase them off me, like on the spot. That was really cool, because that's how the network grows. So far, actually, so my talk was really about how do I, why am I doing this when there's so many other places to host sites, especially static sites. It feels like a solved problem when you look at it from the perspective of you live in Europe, you live in America, and you have so many data centers, so many good ISPs, so many hosting providers. But what I found in living in Singapore is that in Singapore, you get all that infrastructure maybe to an even higher degree sometimes, because it's such a small place with so much infrastructure. But as soon as you step outside, you have a complete lack of data center hosting capacity, and you have absolutely ridiculous routing. Things like, I was mentioning in my talk as well, I'm tracing connections between Singapore and Thailand, and they go through California. Instead of like 30 milliseconds, it becomes like 200 something milliseconds, and it's really painful for everyone there, needlessly doing all this wasted bandwidth, and it's further congesting pipes that are already very scarce resources. So I really wanted to target something for markets that don't have that kind of infrastructure. And the problem that I'm not trying to solve is going out there and building all that infrastructure. I'm trying to use open source as tools for people there on site in this vast part of the world where they could do it themselves, but maybe not in the traditional sense. Not if you have to spend millions of dollars setting up a company to build a CDN or a hosting company, but you could do it with the new commodity hardware, like these little ARM servers that are based on phone CPUs, and the availability of fiber in most cities in Asia. In most new developments, you have some part of the city that will have fiber, because you build a new building and you put fiber into that building. You're not going to put DSL. That's only an incumbent market problem. In new developments, even in existing cities, new developments typically just tend to have fiber installed. And as soon as you have fiber within that country, you can put servers onto that fiber, and it's as good as having a data center, but without the need of all the overhead. also lets you start really small. My focus has been on sub $200 hardware that is really just off the shelf Raspberry Pi on steroids type of thing. And you combine that with a solid state drive, and it'll saturate a gigabit link, which is what you kind of find in most parts of China, India, Southeast Asia. In every city you can have some ISPs that offer you that at a reasonable rate, sub $100 per month. And like if you turn multi-million dollar build a facility into a couple $100 operating expense, it opens up a new model, I think. And so that's where this is heading right now. And yeah, that was my talk mostly.
Yeah, so I think this is a really great initiative, and I think can really help out just with bandwidth around the world. I know just based on companies I've worked at in the past, targeting some of these markets that bandwidth and latency was often one of the biggest concerns. What have you seen so far in the growth? Like how many of these are in the wild so far?
So 6 months ago we started with one, which was essentially an iMac that has been my gaming computer for the past 8 years, and that was the first pop in my house. But after giving a couple of talks at local meetups that may or may not have been organized by myself for the purpose of just describing my project to my friends, a lot of my friends basically stepped up and said like, hey, this is a cool idea, I want to support that. And Singapore being the country that is, there's a lot of developers with disposable income, but a lot of them are not from Singapore. So I have friends like CTO of a startup, a travel company, and like he's a Vietnamese originally, but he was able to say like, hey, I'm going to fund a couple of these servers, and we're going to deploy one in Vietnam, we're going to deploy one in Dubai, like wherever like they might have offices. I have friends who can put them into their offices in like in Thailand, in Malaysia, in Jakarta, in Manila now. So I mean, it's still relatively small numbers, but I'm proud that in the last couple of months we've gone from basically 0 or 1 to over 20 now. And just today, like there's a couple of more going to be coming up in Europe. In the last month, we've launched a couple more around the UK. And so yeah, it's like starting very small, but I feel like this could work. I'm also starting a new initiative, which is based on feedback. We're, even purchasing a server is kind of like, it's the feedback that I often get is, why can't I just use my old hardware that I have lying around? And sometimes that's like, I have an old server or I have an old laptop that could probably serve some traffic. Now there's security issues around how do you engineer to make sure that the data, the certificates to handle connections are secured and all that. Because you have to sort of assume a hostile environment when it's not a sort of semi-trusted data center. One thing I'm trying to do is build a sort of a second tier CDN that would handle non-storage content. That would be like in memory only. So if you like unplug it, it gets wiped out. That would be like DNS. So an issue that I'm focusing on now is how do we protect DNS with new standards like DOH, like DNS over HTTPS, where you tunnel DNS traffic over HTTP2, or in the future we like HTTP3 over QUIC and things like that. What we could do is use like, let's say a Raspberry Pi to establish a long-lasting, a long-lived connection from clients, from any client device to these servers that don't necessarily need to have, let's say like port 80 and 443, so they could run on any port as long as it takes incoming connections. And a lot of people have Raspberry Pis collecting dust in a drawer somewhere because after connecting a couple of blinking LEDs, you kind of get tired of it. And this could be like a little, there's like a little bit of geek cred that you get out of running a Raspberry Pi that's doing something useful to the world. It's how I want to go like several orders of magnitude beyond the, like let's say that we have 20 now, we could probably get to maybe 100 by the end of the year or in a couple of months, could extrapolate that to hundreds. And that's nowhere near enough because my goal is really to go to every single ISP at every single city in the world. And then we're looking at maybe a couple 100,000, which is about 2 orders of magnitude more than the current largest CDN by a number of POPs, points of presence. And I think by joining forces with like everyone's idle Raspberry Pis, we could definitely achieve just by the count of locations. Because with DNS, it really just matters how much latency you have. And then you don't need like huge storage or huge processing power or bandwidth, right? You can have very low bandwidth, But as long as you're on the same ISP, it's going to be fast. It's going to be like sub 10 millisecond latencies. Yeah, that would be a cool goal, I think. Secure everyone's DNS with an army of Raspberry Pis.
Yeah, that's really exciting, and really excited to see how this project grows and where it goes from now.
Thanks.
So the last question is for everyone listening in who wants to get involved. How can they get involved? Like, where do they go to learn more about this?
So yeah, my call to action would be just test it out, use the service. It's really like an alternative right now to host your static sites. Any static site will do. It's got cool features beyond the traditional ones that do automatically analyze all your content for optimizing it with the HTTP2 server push. So it'll eliminate all the round trips from HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, like import dependencies, any resource loading. So just go to commons.host and follow the instructions. There's a bunch of documentation now. There's some tutorials. Watch the video from the conference. There's a little bit of information how to use it. And if you're interested in getting involved with hosting the servers, just shoot me a message on Twitter at commonshost or at sebdeckers, and we can work it out.
All right, thank you so much for joining us. This was a fun chat.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.